Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here in our Bentonville First webinar series that First United Methodist Church here in Bentonville is sponsoring. This week, I'm so excited. We are talking through business. Each one of these deals with a different aspect of our community, and today's topic is business. My name is Reverend Dr. Michelle Morris, and I'm the lead pastor here at First United Methodist Church in downtown Bentonville. And we just hope that as you listen in on this conversation, it sparks some possibilities, some responses to who we are and where we are now and where we are headed in Bentonville. We have 4 panelists that are joining us here today. I'm excited to introduce each one of them. Let's start with our first panelist that we're going to introduce is Ed Clifford. Ed has worked for almost 20 years for Walmart in merchandising management positions. He then served from 2001 to 2012 as the president CEO of the Bentonville Chamber of Commerce. He's now the president CEO of the Jones Trust, which runs the Jones Center, the largest community center in the region, and 3 nonprofit centers housing over 100 nonprofits at much less than market lease rates. They have over 850,000 square feet of space dedicated to improving the quality of life in Northwest Arkansas. So Ed, like many of the panelists that we're going to see here, you could have been on our nonprofit panel, but here we are. We want you on this business panel. We're so grateful for the wealth of knowledge and experience that you're bringing to us today.
You bet. Thank you.
Yeah. And then our next panelist is Kayleen Griffith. Kayleen is the president and CEO of Visit Bentonville, which brands, sells, and promotes Bentonville as a tourism destination. Consequently, a lot of people end up deciding to move here. So your work is definitely an investment in our community. Visit Bentonville also keeps a finger on the pulse of the hospitality and restaurant industry as a result of being tied into tourism. Kayleen is committed to service in our community, and she also mentors young women coming up in the business world. So thank you, Kayleen, so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Next up to introduce is our next panelist is Dr. Joe Rollins, who is the Director of Workforce Development for the Northwest Arkansas Council. In his work at the council, he has the opportunity to serve as a liaison between students, educators, post-secondary institutions, and business leaders, working to develop and strengthen the region's education programs so that students get needed training for area jobs and employers have a skilled workforce. Joe works with educators and businesses to develop and strengthen Northwest Arkansas's career and technical education programs. He connects colleges, technical schools, and high school training programs with potential employers and facilitates meeting their workforce needs. Joe also builds and develops regional training models for and partnership needs with area chambers of commerce. Joe works in partnership with all 16 of the region's school districts and post-secondary institutes and focus on employer engagement, workforce pipeline development strategies, facilitating apprenticeships, internships, and connecting Northwest Arkansas residents with employment opportunities, and invites employers to join the process. And Joe, like I mentioned, you could be here on this panel, which we're grateful you're here, but next week we do education and you would have fit just as well there. So love that all of these are overlapping with one another. So thank you, Joe, so much for being here today.
Thank you.
And then our final panelist is Russell Schaefer. Russell is the Senior Director of Global Culture, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Walmart, and along with his team has responsibility for enterprise strategy, brand identity, external relations, benchmarking, and associate engagement related to the company's global CDEI initiatives. He joined Walmart in 2006 and has held roles managing global internal communications and benefits communications. In previous roles as Senior Manager of Constituent Relations, Russell managed Walmart's corporate strategy and stakeholder outreach for the people with disabilities and aging constituencies. His perspectives on disability advocacy and inclusion are informed by his experiences with retinitis pigmentosa, a genetic degenerative eye disease that was diagnosed when Russell was 10 years old and led to his legal blindness by his late 20s. Russell, we are grateful to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
So we want to have as much time as possible to discuss today's topic. So I want to get right to our questions, but I will encourage those of you that are joining us to feel free to share some comments or some questions in our Facebook feed. Let us know what you need to what you're curious about, and if we have time at the end, we'll be happy to integrate some of those questions for this wonderful panel. So let's get to the questions, and I want to start a little bit with getting some historical background. So I'm going to ask Ed, since he has a long time stretch of being part of the Bentonville community and business community, to share with us, how did we get to this point in the Bentonville business field? What led us here?
Interesting. So let's start in 1984 when I arrived in Bentonville to work for Walmart. We had about 400 people in the office, and it was a pretty small town. We didn't have a red light in Bentonville. We had a blinker in front of the Methodist church, but that was it. No red lights. And so we began to grow at 15% a year. And so from 600 people in that office to when I retired in 2001, probably 16 or 17,000, all the facilities of Walmart. So that's part of it. But there's a really unknown part that made a huge difference, and that is when Sam came into a Saturday morning meeting and said we would no longer deal with independent reps, we would only deal with officers of the corporations that we dealt with. It made a huge difference because it didn't take very long before Procter & Gamble and Newell and Unilever and Coleman and the rest established offices here so that they could have an officer residing in Bentonville. And today we have 1,450 offices, perhaps more, of suppliers in Northwest Arkansas, probably 18 to 20,000 people at high paying jobs. And that made a huge difference in the business environment and the social environment in Northwest Arkansas. And then of course, Alice in 2005 said, I think I'll open a museum. And bingo, the entire tourism trade changed. And now we have an amazing Bentonville community that is the envy of lots of people. We'll let Tom come in. There he goes. Okay. You're muted, Michelle.
Tom is here. We're grateful to have him hopped on. I don't see his camera yet, but Tom, can you speak? Maybe we can hear you. Okay. We'll bring him in just a bit. Tom is here. He has you're gonna have to stop screen sharing though, Tom. You gotta stop that. All right. Okay. So thank you, Ed, for giving us a little bit of that historical background. We're grateful for that. I do want to now think and reflect on Tom. You keep screen sharing. You're blocking us up here. So okay. So we're gonna have a moment to reflect on how the pandemic has changed the trajectory of your work. So I would like to hear from each of you where you're headed, and what this means for you. Let's start a little bit. Let's just start with, since I introduced you last, Russell, let's start with you. So how has the pandemic changed the trajectory of your work? Where were you headed? Where are you headed now?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Michelle. I think from a broad Walmart perspective, obviously the pandemic changed a lot of things. When you think about Walmart as a retailer and serving our customers and our communities across the country, but especially right here in our home region of Northwest Arkansas, with the constraints that the pandemic put initially on the supply chain and, just some of the concerns around health and safety protocols, it changed our hours. Many of our stores went from 24 hours to closing overnight for deep cleaning. We put up the plexiglass. We put in, the different safety protocols. 6 feet of social distancing, temperature over 100. Stay home. All of those different things to help ensure that our customers were able to get the essential goods and services that they needed, even in the midst of a critical pandemic, and to ensure that our associates and customers alike were safe. And so I can't state enough our gratitude to the frontline Walmart associates who, I think are in a lot of ways are akin to first responders during that time, just in terms of keeping the economy going, keeping the shelves stocked and ensuring that our customers had access to the staples and the goods that they needed to be able to, continue with day-to-day life, even as we sheltered in place and took the steps necessary to, try to flatten the curve of the pandemic. So it certainly changed the way in which we operated and did business in a really clear and tangible way. But I think, at a broader level, I think it accelerated a lot of the things that we were looking to do strategically. Anybody who's a Walmart customer or, shopped with us for a while, lived in Northwest Arkansas, saw, whether it was the standalone facility on J Street or the grocery pickup at, neighborhood markets like the one on Central or, in other parts of the community, that online grocery and grocery pickup was part of the strategy for Walmart. I think that the pandemic accelerated that in a lot of ways out of necessity, both in terms of what the customers needed, but also what we needed from a business perspective. It led us to put things into practice faster and to, kind of test different things on the spot and find out what worked and what needed to be optimized. But I think from a talent perspective, we also had to move with speed as well. There certainly were a lot of people right here in our community, as well as across the country, who found themselves furloughed or out of work at their traditional employer as a result of the pandemic. And fortunately, Walmart was in a position during the pandemic where we weren't letting people go. In fact, we were looking to hire more people and to bring people in faster to meet the needs of the customer. And so we were able to provide those employment opportunities to those who maybe found themselves out of work because of furlough or their businesses closing. But we had to figure out how to do that at a pace and scale commensurate with what the pandemic was causing. And we, took what was historically about a 2-week lead time to get somebody ramped up from application to onboard in our store to about 48 hours. And, ultimately that, was an innovation that helped us meet the demand curve for talent in the highest peak of the pandemic. But that's something that ultimately has made our business more effective and efficient afterwards, is that, there's no need to go back to a 2-week lead time to hire talent now. The things that we learned out of necessity during the pandemic have, resulted in efficiency now and going forward. And so, I think those are just a few examples of, the ways in which we had to pivot to, keep the business going from a customer service perspective. But how the pandemic, even in the midst of all of the hardship and chaos that it caused from a pure business perspective, there was opportunity there to learn how to be more efficient going forward because of the pressure that the pandemic put on the operations.
Yeah. And Kayleen, I know in the hospitality industry, there were real challenges for them as everybody suddenly stood still. So can you share a little bit about your experience with that?
Sure. Yeah. And I say before, we were all, I say sunshine and rainbows, prior to COVID hitting, and everything was positive. We'd been double-digit increases year over year for the last 8 years. And so when COVID hit, it was a huge challenge that our hotels were, hit hard because the corporate world and the leisure traveler stopped. And then, so from there, our workforce was hit hard from that perspective. And, those are all challenges that we have. So our budget was hit hard. So we had to make a lot of changes within our office where we had to, I had to furlough employees, and then we had to let employees go. My fortunate thing is that I had hopefully had interviews for all 3 of them that we had to let go prior to leaving. I worked with them to do that. I think, our biggest challenge now is our budget, where we're at. We're about $1 million down in our industry in just our organization, but across the state, we're continuing to see that. And then workforce needs, if you're going into a restaurant, you see empty tables. It's not because they can't serve them, because they don't have enough employees to take care of them. And so I see that frustration from a consumer standpoint. But I also think that we have a consumer confidence. And I use the term, I heard this the other day, that we're kind of in an unusual time. We're in between before COVID and after the vaccine. We're in that little middle of the road right now, trying to figure out, how do we make our consumer confident so people want to travel again? And I do think that people are looking to travel, closer to home, getting in the car, that type of thing. So our challenge is, how do we make people feel comfortable again traveling? But our number one, it's really interesting for me because, Joe and I will probably have some conversations after this, but we are at, and this is a national challenge with the workforce. It was never at the top of my list. From a tourism standpoint, my job was to invite people into our community, plan these wonderful events, make sure people are having fun. And that was our job. And so I always said I get to do, and I think Ed and I've had this conversation many times, I get to talk about the feel good stuff. It's all the feel good. It's kind of changed now. We have more challenges in our industry. How do I help our restaurants? How do I support our hotels? How do we help with retail? What do we do to make the experience positive for our consumers so that they have confidence? So those are some of our major challenges right now. But our work life, or our work has focused differently. We're still going to continue to sell our city, but we also have to make sure that we can address, when we sell our city and bring these events in, we have to make sure they're having a positive experience. So we have to be working with our hotels and restaurants to create that, hopefully that experience that we're going to continue to have in the area. I think one of our biggest challenges, and Russell, don't hold it against me, corporate, that's a big challenge for us right now. Our hotels are still 30% down in occupancy because of the corporate. But I will give you, kudos to our community that when I got here 17 years ago, we're only the home of Walmart. That was our tagline for everything. Now we have a leisure audience that, if we did not have cycling and arts, we would probably be about 70% down rather than only 30% down with our hotels. Our restaurants are starting to come back very well, but that overnight stay is still happening. We just don't have it during the week. We're getting it on the weekends, which is benefiting us, but that's a challenge for us from a standpoint, and we know that's coming, and that's corporate all across the United States. That's not just at Bentonville, that's everywhere. So.
Yeah. I actually used to work in a hotel in Fayetteville. It was before there were a lot of the hotels in Bentonville, and that's what we did, was we had people that were coming in for corporate business. So I can see how that would be a struggle. Joe, a lot of folks have been remarking about changes in workforce and what's needed. So what has this done for your work?
Well, to say that it's changed it quite a bit, I think would be an understatement. And my guess is that everyone who's either listening or everyone on this panel has experienced some kind of shift in either employees or folks looking for positions throughout the course of what we've been dealing with through COVID. But I'm kind of a numbers guy. So let's start with the basics. We've been looking at unbelievable growth across Northwest Arkansas, and that there may not be a better case to look at than Bentonville, because number one, the growth and development has been happening in certainly an attractive way in every sense of the word, both visually attractive. It's also attractive to folks looking to our area. So kudos for that kind of work. But then as we look at this influx of people, we've grown by almost 57,000 people in Northwest Arkansas over the last 5 years. we're projected to grow by another 53-ish thousand over the next 5 years. So that growth and development, that inflow of people from across the country, candidly from across the globe, looking at Northwest Arkansas, that's going to increase. That brings its great attributes, and it also brings some challenges. So if you look at some of our more recent achievements as a region, that number 4 place in the country to work and live, that's a great thing. It means that many more people are also looking at us in terms of employability, coming from a multitude of walks of life. That also means that they have to become enculturated to who we are. They need to become part of our community. And there's a lot more to it than just jobs. Now, that being said, COVID's has impacted our ability to maintain an ongoing stream of employees. And I think it's been referenced here a couple of times. This morning, whenever we all woke up, just shy of 10,000 open jobs in Northwest Arkansas. And I think they would touch every group that's on this panel. And if I want to talk about some of those high needs areas, we live in a part of the state where retail, transportation, logistics, managerial, office positions, there are several of those positions, and they impact most of us on this panel. But if you talk about just the growth also, who are going to be the employees who are going to build all that infrastructure, all those highways, all those homes, office buildings, to keep all that moving? So certainly construction, materials handling, that's going to be a key driver for us. We're quickly becoming a healthcare destination. So as we talk about things to market, things for people to look at us to do, certainly arts, culture, entertainment, food service, business, healthcare is going to be the next rung on that ladder, having people to look at us. So I think I have to include healthcare as a high needs area. But the question that you posed to me directly is, how has this impacted our work? Well, I just talked about the number of openings. There are 10,000 openings right now. And the employees that we do have, we're seeing a very blended work model. Certainly, I think all of us have seen more and more folks working from home or some blended variety of that. I don't see that changing in the immediate future. I think some of our companies are realizing there are some health benefits to that for folks. They have a little more flexibility in their schedule. I think our employees are certainly seeing it because there's a safety of being at home. They feel more comfortable being at home. I think they feel like they can be a little more comfortable at home. That shifts how we provide some of our workforce outreach, our training models. We're doing a lot of digital providing for training development at home. But another key issue that I want to make sure we're talking about, and there are going to be some folks who are watching this, it may be an aha moment for them. We're staring down the barrel of a little over 130,000 Northwest Arkansans staring down the barrel of retirement here in the next year to two.
Ooh.
So as we talk about that wealth of institutional knowledge, eyeballing going home, I have to make sure that I also brag on our millennial population, our Gen Z population, because they are one of our strongest working cohorts across the region. But now let's bring this home to something that, to your viewers, they're going to do this all the time. What do you do as a church? You mentor, you guide, you coach, you bring along the next generation so that they can learn from people who have been there, done that, know the ropes. That's a big part of the model that we're trying to pursue regionally for workforce development. You're going to hear words coming forward in major ways around that apprenticeship terminology. We have to lose some of the old perception of what that word means. What that really means is you're learning at the hands of someone who's been there, done that, knows the ins and outs of the game, and is willing to pass that knowledge on to our next generation. The other side, you're going to hear a lot of adult upskilling. I know that something that I wanted to talk about, some of the larger challenges we're seeing in our current businesses is holding on to the talent that we do have. Because right now, there are several open jobs. It's reasonably understandable if talented professionals want to look at different opportunities. As we see employers who are willing to upskill, invest in, and elevate their current talent, that's going to be their key to holding on to great folks. So as your viewers are going to try and understand, what is this guy talking about? I want to make sure that they can make the connection, latch on to this younger generation, make sure that they're learning from you in your professional roles, and Doctor, certainly in your church roles as well. But I think you're going to see a lot more of that mentoring model coming forward in the years ahead.
Yeah. we're sitting here. I've got my tech person here, and we're like, ooh, we're having moments here. In fact, one of the things that I've seen churches be challenged with, and I think would be phenomenal in Bentonville, is the idea of a vocation Bible school, where you have, it's for adults, and you have people come together and have those kind of mentoring spaces. So that's very exciting, and maybe we should talk more about how to make that sort of happen. Tom, yeah.
Before I jump, can I make one more point?
Sure.
You may have folks watching this right now who are looking for a job, their next job, or a better job. I threw out a big number, 10,000 opportunities open when we woke up this morning. From the Northwest Arkansas Council perspective, we've built a website that can help anybody, whether they're in high school or whether they're an adult looking for their next career, to look at all of those postings real time. We update it every night at midnight, and they can ask questions about the kinds of jobs, the kind of degrees they might have, their interests, their preferences, and sort all of those jobs. And that website address is careersnwa.com. Free site, resources there if you need help to build that resume or just to find, research, point, click, and apply for that career. You can do it all in one spot. So I had to make sure that we made sure our folks were aware of the opportunities around.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Tom, we still can't see you, but maybe we can hear you. Can you talk for a second?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
My biggest challenge is getting my face on this computer, but I just can't get it done. I'm a Bentonville native, and I remember when Bentonville had 4,000 people, and you knew everybody in town, and Northwest Arkansas was basically an agricultural-based economy. Now, what changed? Well, it's obvious that the Walmart influence, we've become a much more, we're the economic engine driving the state of Arkansas. Our big issue, as far as I can see, is the growth that has occurred, and that the growth that is predicted to continue to occur. I was on the planning commission for the city of Bentonville for 17 years, and we always felt that we were behind the curve in infrastructure. There's no way to catch up when we increase 50% in 10 years on our population growth. We're going to continue to see that, but what we're seeing in Bentonville is the infill for the brand new houses being built near downtown, and old houses being torn down and brand new houses being built. It's caused a market phenomenon that borders on being a little bit crazy, because prices paid and, quote, market value, unquote, has really been affected by this infill of brand new houses in old neighborhoods. One of the things that bothers me is that land has become so expensive that instead of buying a house in Bentonville, all of our smaller towns around us, such as Centerton, Heifel, Gravette, Pea Ridge, there's where the most growth is headed. Now, I've been in the real estate appraisal business for 48 years, and if you've got the opinion that an appraiser is just like the pawn shop people or the antique roadshow, that we can come up with instant answers, I don't have an instant answer. I have to do research before I can make any judgment call on property value. That's one of the, and it's always been a problem for the appraisal industry, is as soon as you look at a property, the property owner says, well, you've done your homework, what's it worth? And that's just not the way it works. A residential appraisal will take anywhere from 5 to 10 hours to do the research and do everything possible and necessary to come up with a quote defined market value. My fear, and it's almost a trepidation, is of the growth that's coming. We've got great people in our city with the planning board and the city planners, and they're doing everything they can to keep things on as even a keel as they can. But again, it's my trepidation that my kids and my grandkids are going to face more traffic, problems with infrastructure, water, sewer, roads. I'm not pessimistic, but I have extreme. I want to be cautious, but we need obviously to move forward, and we've got the greatest economic engine in the state of Arkansas and in the South with Walmart, and we need to partner up with them and all of the other industries that we have and think and move forward. So I apologize that I'm not able to see, you're not able to see me, but that's not a big loss.
No, thanks. No, that it's interesting because that has come up in prior panels that we had. It came up particularly in the nonprofits, challenges around housing, particularly that we might be pricing people out of even being able to live here. And I will admit, as on my way in, I live about 6 blocks from the church, and I was walking in this morning and I saw what there had been a house there just a couple weeks ago, and now it's leveled and there's a new foundation laid. And that's how fast all of this is happening. And certainly we've all seen some challenges around the cost of living here in Bentonville. That's a challenge as well. But I think so we do have significant challenges, right? Growth is a wonderful thing, but also comes with some challenges to it. But I would love to hear from each of you what you're excited about for the possibilities for our future here in Bentonville. What is most exciting for you moving forward? And let's start. Ed, why don't you sound off? And what's exciting for you about this new world?
Just a whole lot of things. But for the Jones Center, and I'll talk about Northwest Arkansas rather than specifically Bentonville, we are the center of diversity in Northwest Arkansas by far. And the challenge that we have, and especially it happened during the pandemic, we had to close the Jones Center, and all of a sudden, all of those people who come to the Jones Center on a regular basis couldn't for 6 weeks. And then we had to figure out how to get them back in there and get them engaged again. So we partnered with UAMS and with Community Clinic to be able to do things for the Marshallese community and the Hispanic community that we never did before at Jones Center, because the real opportunity is taking the diverse population that we have, integrating it into Northwest Arkansas and creating a model workforce that anybody would be proud of. And it's a challenge, but it's certainly not impossible. We see more and more and more in the nursing structures of NWAC and the University of Hispanic and Marshallese young ladies and young men. We see more in other areas, and I'm sure Joe sees them in a lot of different areas. That's the real opportunity to be able to take this Northwest Arkansas community and integrate it into something that is special, and that's what the world's all about anymore. And so we have the opportunity here because we have the residents here that can fulfill that mission. So that's a real interesting opportunity.
Russell, why don't you speak a little bit to the possibilities that you're excited about as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ed's absolutely right. When you think about from a diversity perspective in Northwest Arkansas, I would venture to say that, my wife and I, we moved to this community in 2005. So nearly 16 years ago. And Northwest Arkansas looks a lot different, both from an infrastructure and amenities perspective than it did when we arrived a decade and a half ago, but certainly just from a population demographics perspective as well. And I would venture to say that that's probably even more true for, Ed, who arrived here in 1984, and others who have been here longer. So, the face of Northwest Arkansas has changed a lot. And so, I think when we think about inclusion from a Walmart perspective, we often talk about wanting to ensure that there is an inclusive experience for our associates where they live, work, and play. Ultimately, at the end of the day, Walmart really is only responsible for 1/3 of that equation, the work piece. What happens inside of our four walls. We have some degree of impact over that in terms of ensuring that our associates feel welcome, comfortable, and safe in the workplace environment. But when you think about where our associates live, where they play here in Northwest Arkansas, that's just as important, if not more so, in terms of this war for talent that we talk about so often, in terms of not only retaining our talent here in Northwest Arkansas, but also attracting new talent to the community, both for our business, but also for the suppliers that Ed referenced before. Northwest Arkansas has become a destination for talent, both nationally and internationally. And a big part of that is the cultural developments that we've had here, Crystal Bridges, the Amazium, the impact of the culinary scene that Kayleen spoke to, things like the 8th Street Market or Brightwater, or all the different restaurants that we've established across the community. Not only does that help us attract and retain a younger workforce and a younger population, as was mentioned by Joe earlier, but it also helps us bring a greater diversity from an ethnicity perspective and an intersectional identity perspective to bear. Younger individuals are looking to see, is this community inclusive of all people, even if that is not necessarily my identity? Are my friends or my colleagues who look different than me, who believe different than me, who have a lifestyle different than my own, are they included here? That's become just as important to talent today for the people around you as it is for you yourself. And so I think the more that our community continues to reflect that in the cultural and culinary amenities that we offer, but just in terms of the cohesive and collaborative and curious nature of our community, in terms of learning from one another, celebrating our differences, creating space for them, but also creating those opportunities, those spaces where we can come together and celebrate the things that we have in common, as well as I think the thing that really excites me about where we are as a community today, but where we're heading in the future.
Great, thanks. Russell, I'll just say your camera disappeared there for a second. It may have been like if you got a phone call, a lot of times it'll pop off, so you might check on that. While I asked Kayleen, since he was talking about where we play, that seems like a natural place for you to talk about what you're excited about going forward.
I think, and it's interesting because I had some notes here for myself, and he almost hit every single one of my notes. So it's great. Russell, we're on the same page. So I'm kind of excited about it. I think, what I'm excited about is that, our town has, Bentonville and Northwest Arkansas has transitioned from like that corporate kind of world to this leisure aspect of it. And I think one of the things that when the trails were initially developed, I think they were developed more so for the quality of life. It wasn't, kind of enhancing that quality of life that we have with our residents. And so if we can continue to create those quality of life experiences for our residents that also create these tourism type amenities for us to sell and promote, we have this win-win for both our locals and our visitors. And I think for me is that we have this blank slate that we are opportunity to really grow as a community and figure out where are the gaps. I think that's what I love most about Bentonville and Northwest Arkansas. We create these blank pages and we kind of throw things that spaghetti to the wall and see what sticks. And then we work towards it, and we do it very well collaboratively. Even like Ed and I work together on different things. It doesn't mean that we're segmented by cities. We're segmented. We, as a region, we are fortunate that we make things happen together. So for me, there are two things. One, I love working here because it's kind of like the box has been erased. And we get to do what we get to do, and we get to do it well because we create the right environment with the right people. And I think that we have this blank slate. Let's keep creating these quality of life experiences because I live here, so I want to experience them. But then I'm fortunate that I get to sell and promote them as a tourism destination. So from everything that Russell said, from the cultural experience to the cycling and outdoor adventures, because during COVID that was the number one thing for us, and then going into the aviation and the culinary experience, and the upcoming music scene, and the all of these things, and the film production, that's even growing in this area. So all these things that we get to talk about are great assets for our locals because it helps our workforce, it helps what's going on, but then it also gives us just an opportunity to become this great destination for people to visit. So for me, I think it's the people I work with and the opportunities that are not seen yet, that we're everybody has this big vision. Let's keep going for that big vision for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Joe, why don't you sound off on what are you excited about for the future?
The current culture that we have, to be just in a word, as I look at, especially from a workforce standpoint, I see our K-12s, I see our school districts grasping fully the importance of what it means to teach our kids about opportunities in the region. And whenever I hear about Kayleen talking about that culture, those real life experiences, those things that bring people to the region, those are also the things that keep folks in a region. And right now, the culture of starting early, making sure that our students in our K-12s have a much stronger foundation of the opportunities here. We're seeing more and more businesses engaging in our schools, which is critical. And my invitation has to be there. If you're a business owner, a business leader, or someone who simply wants to engage in working with our students of any age, please take this invitation to reach out to us to be part of it. That culture is what's going to fuel the ongoing relationships between our high schools, our post-secondaries, our universities, the arms of each of our employers. That feeds right into what Kayleen was talking about, quality of life experiences. If we can grow it, we're also working hard to recruit and attract talent from abroad. We're in a good place. We have a lot to offer in Northwest Arkansas. We're feeding it from the bottom to the top. A lot of opportunities in front of us. I'm excited about that in itself.
Well, y'all have got me really excited too. Thank you for that. So Tom, you were kind of pessimistic with your last answer. So I want to give you a chance to answer this question, and also then to answer the final question that I have for everyone on the panel. I would love everyone on the panel to share with us, if there were no limitations and you could do anything, either in your business context or in our Bentonville community, what would you do and why? So Tom, tell us first of all what you're excited about going forward, and then tell us what you would do if you could do anything.
I am excited and extremely optimistic for my grandchildren because of the educational system that the Bentonville schools have offered. For the school system itself has come a long way from when I graduated in 1968 from Old High in Bentonville. The opportunities through crystal bridges, the momentary, the culture that has been brought to Bentonville gives my grandchildren an education that I never had. I'm extremely thrilled that the Walton Foundation has stepped into that area and will continue to grow and look for more opportunities for the youth that we are raising and that have been raised here. One thing I do want to emphasize is that we must overcome the COVID-19 pandemic. Until we do, we're going to stay as a divided country, and we, divided we fall. So we need to come together and somehow work it out that we are all in the same boat, and we need to row as hard and as fast as we can to continue. And I think if I could change one thing, it would be to look at Northwest Arkansas as one big community. And as a big community, and that would be an inclusionary community that includes all races, creeds, colors, religion, you name it, and we need to come together. A very wise person in my mind said, all you need is love. So that's where I'll end it. And again, I'm not pessimistic, but I'm cautiously looking at the future based upon the growth patterns that have been predicted, and we're going to have to pull together or we'll pull apart.
Tom, thank you for that, and thank you for now planting that song in my head. So, Kayleen, what would you do if you could do anything, either in business or in the Bentonville community? What would you do?
I always say that we don't have limitations. We have opportunities to make things happen. So, I think for me, I just want to keep moving forward. We're as a group and as a community. The big thing for us is that we want to continue to create experiences, and how we do that is with new opportunities. And so I think, this is a hard question for me because I don't really feel like I have limitations. I feel like when we come up with ideas, we put the right people at the table and we make those happen. So of course, I want more trails. I want more experiences. I'd love to see more climbing. I love the outdoor opportunities because I think that's the direction that our tourism industry is going. People are looking for those type of outdoor, activities or opportunities. So I want to just create, how do we continue to create experiences? And I want a variety of them. I'm not limiting it to one or two. I want a variety of experiences. So I think if I could do anything for the community or for our residents and our visitors, is how do we continue to create opportunities and not just one? So we address from the young kids to the older adults at all levels. And that's what I think our focus should be on.
Great. Okay, Joe, what would you do?
I think I'm going to finish the way that I started, making sure that our current generations who are working, who are probably watching today, who have jobs, who have experiences, to mentor, to teach, to engage. To me, the success starts whenever we bring that knowledge, that awareness piece into our children's lives early. And then we continue to stay connected with ongoing mentoring, engagement in the process, engagement in their lives. A lot of our kids need that mentor to look up to follow, to see the right way to go. That applies in life, that applies in careers, that applies in the future of this region. I think making sure that we continue to engage, mentor, coach, and guide, that's going to be step one. And then bringing a greater awareness to the opportunities that we have to offer for our kids, for our workforce, for those who are looking for their next opportunity. It all goes hand in hand. So communication, engagement, awareness. I think that's going to be your key.
All right. Thank you so much. Russell.
Yes, thanks, Michelle. I think for me, I think it's really a matter of us just continuing to press progress forward around access and equity for all. Before we came live, Michelle and I were having a conversation, and she was talking to me a little bit about this whole notion within the church of Band-Aid change and transformative change. And it really struck a chord. She talked about systems being the piece of transformative change. And we have a very similar model that we have been talking about inside Walmart for the past few years. It's what we call a groundwater approach or philosophy. That looks at things from a fish, lake, and groundwater perspective. And I think as people, if we were to walk by a lake and we were to see a single fish up on the shore, belly up, we might ask ourselves, what's wrong with the fish? Why is the fish sick? And we would take steps to treat the fish. If we walked by that same lake the next day and we saw 100 fish belly up on the shore, we might think to ourselves, gosh, there's something wrong with the lake. There's something wrong with the environment that these fish are in. We've got to treat the lake. So we take all the fish out of the lake. We treat it. We clean up whatever toxin or whatever issue is causing the fish to be sick, and we would put them back in. And if the issue was truly a lake issue, then that would be the end of it. But so often the issue is actually a groundwater issue, and it's the water that comes up from underground and replenishes that lake. And we can treat the current environment or the lake, clean it up, but it's only going to be a short-term fix. If we don't address the systemic groundwater issues that are creating the inaccess to access, then we're only going to have a short-term solution. And as Michelle astutely said on our pre-call chat, we need to do fish solutions. We need to do lake solutions, but we also need to do groundwater solutions. And I think a lot of times our efforts are spent, primarily on fish fixing, because it's the path of least resistance and its immediate impact. And you can see, right then and there, the difference that you made in someone's life. And, I think that is truly profound. And I would even offer, from a faith perspective, is very core to the tenets of the Christian faith. It's from a Michelle's congregation perspective. The system changes piece is the groundwater. It's a long play, and it's harder, and it doesn't necessarily show up immediately, and it's much more time consuming and costly. But if we want to build the sustainable community of Northwest Arkansas that we want, for our future and for future generations, then shifting our focus upstream and frankly to the groundwater, I think is the type of mindset that we need to be taking. In this community that's got great prosperity, how do we ensure that the systems are set up in such a way that all people have equitable access to that, whatever the system may be, healthcare, education, work, so many of the things that we've talked about here today.
Thank you so much. Now, Ed, share with us your perspective. What would you do if you could do anything?
So I'm a downtown guy. My wife and I in 1996 started the Bentonville project with 6 other people, and we all know where that went. Well, I'm at the Jones Center right now, and we received a Walton Family Foundation Design Excellence Grant for the 54 acres that, in fact, surround the Jones Center. And we're about finished with that design, and we'll go out and raise some money. And it's on the very edge of the downtown Springdale area. And I think we all realized that 5 years ago or 10 years ago, there was a huge gap between Rogers and Fayetteville, and that was Springdale's downtown and quality of life. And so for me, the exciting part of that Design Excellence Grant is transforming the Jones campus into the third or fourth leading attractor of people in Northwest Arkansas, and then having downtown Springdale follow along, because it's got the best bones for a downtown that anybody has by far. And it's also is the one that can celebrate diversity more than any downtown. And bingo, and then we put together something that really adds to the quality of life for Northwest Arkansas. And maybe Rogers will follow a little bit, and maybe Fayetteville will follow a little bit, and maybe it'll all come together. Bingo.
I was going to say, I think the downtown Bentonville folks would take you on about the bones of a downtown.
They do often. Right?
Right?
Haley and I've talked about that.
Yeah. So I love that this panel has not only put before us some wonderful challenges that we can be part of the solutions for, but also that you've cast big visions for us that we can step into. I want to share with you. Whenever I was kicking off this series, when we were talking about nonprofits, I actually said, I challenged them and said, the church is actually the most agile institution we have in our society. Business has regulations that hamper them to quite a bit, and then education has regulations that hamper them. There are just government entities have regulations that keep them. The church, because the separation of church and state actually doesn't have a lot of those regulations. And so I want to challenge our people to remember that we can, these folks dream big and make big dreams happen. We can be part of those big dreams as well. And maybe we're a piece of the puzzle that if they are running into any places where regulations are a struggle, we can be a partner with them to provide the space to get around those. So I would challenge all of you and invite all of you that are on this panel that if you're running into those things and you need an entity to work with, that come talk to us and let us dream together and dream big, because from our perspective, from this faith perspective, we worship a God of abundance, not of scarcity, and we worship God of miracles. And so and this panel has been wonderful to be part of because of the miracles that you make happen. And thank you for that. We are at the end of our time. I thank you all so much for giving your time and sharing so much about your work. I hope, again, that this has inspired those of us who are watching to think of ways to get involved and to think of things that we can dream of. We'll continue this conversation this Sunday at our worship services at First United Methodist Church in Bentonville at both 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock in person or on Facebook. And then I want to also mention that since we have talked about coming out of the pandemic, but we're not there yet, we do have something special coming up at our church on Wednesday, November 10th at 6:30. This is a service of mourning and hope. It's a special service for us to recognize the things that we have lost. There are folks among us that have lost jobs. There are people that have lost time with family. There are people that have lost, my son lost his senior year. There are all kinds of different ways that we have lost. And of course, some people have lost their lives. So we want to invite anyone in the community to come out for this special service. Again, it's Wednesday, November 10th at 6:30. Join us here and we'll take some time to mourn that, but also look for the hope that will come out of all of this and the future that we will have together, and hopefully the unity that Tom has invited us to reflect on as well. So please come out and join us for that. I will also mention that one of our music directors, Roy Wheeler, has written a Requiem for COVID that will debut that night as well. And we especially would like to invite our medical workers and our first responders who have carried so much of this. And then Russell mentioned, the folks that were frontline workers that were out there when everything else was shutting down and they kept things going. We want to, of course, recognize them as well. And then next Tuesday will be our last webinar, and we're going to cover education. And we will hear from Northwest Arkansas Community College, from and from the Benton Public Schools. We'll have folks on the panel for that, so please join us for that. I want to thank our behind-the-scenes tech guru, Brooke Crumpler, who's been helping manage some of the tech in the behind the scenes. And then again, thank you all so much to our wonderful panelists for your time, for your expertise, for the visions that you've shared, and for helping us learn so much about business in Bentonville. I ask everyone to be inspired by the efforts that were described here as we learn about how to make Bentonville first so the rest of the world can follow. And we wish blessings and peace to everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.